The young and the restless spoilers in the midst of swirling chaos and tangled emotions, the delicate balance of love and loyalty was being pushed to its very limits. Kyle, whose heart beat solely for Claire, found himself trapped in a labyrinth of conflicting desires and dangerous schemes. Determined to preserve the purity of his love for Claire, Kyle knew he had to act. He could no longer let the interference of others threaten the peaceful life they once dreamed of building together. For months, Summer had been relentlessly trying to insert herself into the space that Kyle and Claire had nurtured so carefully. Though she had experienced moments of triumph where she believed that her efforts had finally succeeded, the truth was more complicated. Summer's claim was rooted in a deep-seated passion for Kyle, a passion that had once seemed mutually exclusive when they shared the responsibility of raising Harrison. They had built a life together, a life that Summer was now unwilling to relinquish, even as Kyle's heart remained steadfastly anchored with Claire. The situation had reached a boiling point. Kyle's inner turmoil was evident, every fiber of his being longed for the calm and secure love he shared with Claire. In a bid to restore order, he realized that establishing firm boundaries with Summer was not just necessary, but inevitable. The gentle, peaceful atmosphere that Claire yearned for was slipping away, replaced by the volatile energy of unresolved conflict. Yet, Kyle's decision to distance himself from Summer was met with vehement opposition. "Why are you pulling away from me?" Summer demanded, her voice quivering with both anger and hurt. "We're raising Harrison together, you know what we've built. How can you just shut me out when we share everything?" Her words were a piercing reminder of their shared past, a past filled with moments of closeness and mutual dependency. However, Kyle's resolve was unyielding. He needed to protect Claire's heart, and in doing so, he was forced to make choices that split his world into conflicting halves. As every detail of the situation began to crystallize, Summer's fury morphed into a burning desire for retribution. She was determined to confront Claire, to exact a measure of fairness in what she perceived as an injustice. In her eyes, the battlefield was set. If love was worth fighting for, then she was ready to wage war against any force that tried to undermine it. The promise of a duel for the heart, a confrontation where victory would mean supremacy and defeat would bring unending resentment, loomed large in her mind. Amidst this escalating drama, another sinister twist emerged. Victor, ever the puppeteer with a penchant for chaos, issued a chilling command. In a move that stunned everyone, he ordered Claire to betray the Abbott family, to infiltrate their inner sanctum and steal critical business information. This treacherous directive was designed to ensnare Kyle in a trap from which he might never escape. Caught between the imperatives of loyalty and survival, Kyle suddenly found himself at the crossroads of betrayal and love. His every instinct screamed against the machinations set in motion by Victor, yet the pressure of the situation left him scrambling for a resolution that could reconcile his tangled allegiances. The simmering conflict soon reached a breaking point when, in a fit of anger and desperation, Claire herself became entangled in the violence. During a heated altercation intended to defend her honor, she tried to strike Summer, a reaction born of the unbearable pressure and the desire to regain control over her own destiny. The situation exploded into chaos as fists began to fly, each blow echoing the shattered promises and broken hearts of the past. Kyle, torn by the intensity of the moment, watched in dismay as the women he cared for were embroiled in a fight that threatened to ruin everything he had worked so hard to build. In the thick of the brawl, Kyle's emotions surged. Every punch, every shout, every tear was a testament to the profound struggle within him. The chaotic melee was not just an expression of anger, but a desperate bid by each character to assert their identity and claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. On one side, Summer's wrathful determination demanded that Claire be held accountable. If conflict was inevitable, then at least it should serve to prove who truly deserved love and respect. On the other side, Claire's conflicted actions revealed her vulnerability. While she yearned for the security of a calm and genuine relationship with Kyle, the pressure to choose a side, and to act against those who had once been close, was overwhelming. And then came the pivotal moment. As the dust of the confrontation began to settle, Kyle was forced to confront the ultimate question. Who would he stand by in this fierce struggle, a choice that held the fate of multiple lives in its balance? The answer was far from clear. On one hand, his heart had always belonged to Claire, the woman who had shown him the true meaning of love and vulnerability. With her, he felt a connection that transcended the superficial and embraced the core of who he was. Yet, on the other hand, the very act of drawing boundaries with Summer, who, despite her own flaws, had once shared in the responsibilities of nurturing Harrison and had a claim on the life they had built together, seemed to demand a measure of empathy and understanding. Kyle's dilemma was exacerbated by the looming threat of Victor's machinations. His trap was cunningly devised, ensnaring him in a web of deception that could potentially dismantle the life he had so carefully cultivated with Claire. The pressure was immense, and every decision Kyle made now would resonate far into the future. His internal conflict was mirrored by the external chaos, voices clashed, emotions ran high, and the entire cafe, once a refuge of calm, became the stage for a dramatic contest of wills and destinies. In the charged silence that followed the tumultuous exchange of blows, Kyle's mind raced with the weight of his choices. He could sense the raw pain in Claire's eyes, a plea for understanding and a desperate cry for stability. Yet, deep within, he also recognized the unspoken bond he once shared with Summer, a bond now tarnished by betrayal, hurt, and a thirst for revenge. The swirling mix of emotions left him questioning what it truly meant to fight for love. Was it enough to simply protect the one he cherished, or did the act of choosing inevitably cast a shadow of guilt and regret over those left behind? As the onlookers in the cafe absorbed the gravity of the moment, a profound silence fell over the room, a silence heavy with unspoken truths and shattered illusions. In that suspended heartbeat of time, Kyle's decision became the focal point of the unfolding drama. His eyes, reflecting both anguish and determination, met Claire's, silently communicating a promise that transcended words. In that gaze lay the hope of a future free from the vices of betrayal and the chaos of manipulation, a future where love, in its purest form, could finally flourish. Yet, the question remained, who would Kyle choose to stand by? Would he cast aside the remnants of a shared past with Summer, severing ties that had once meant so much, in order to safeguard the sanctity of his relationship with Claire? Or would he attempt to bridge the chasm between conflicting loyalties, risking further pain for the possibility of reconciliation and unity? The answer was not merely a matter of preference, but a choice that carried the burden of legacy, of honor, and of the unyielding belief that love should be both a refuge and a battleground, a place where the heart's true desires could either be nurtured or betrayed. In the days that followed, as the consequences of that fateful confrontation rippled through their lives, Kyle's inner struggle intensified. The delicate equilibrium between love and duty, passion and responsibility, teetered on a knife's edge. Every conversation, every silent moment, every lingering look between Kyle, Claire, and Summer was imbued with the tension of unspoken words and unresolved conflicts. The legacy of that tumultuous day would define their relationships moving forward, casting long shadows over moments that once promised joy and hope. Ultimately, Kyle's choice would not simply determine the course of his own life, but would irrevocably alter the destinies of those around him. In a world where love is as fickle as it is fierce, the lines between right and wrong blur, and the heart must navigate treacherous waters. As the echoes of betrayal and the promise of redemption intertwined, one truth emerged: in the battle for love, there are no easy answers, only the courage to face the consequences of one's actions and the resolve to forge a path toward healing, no matter how arduous the journey might be. In the end, the question that haunted every corner of their intertwined lives was not merely about allegiance, but about the nature of love itself. And as Kyle stood on that precipice of destiny, the decision he was about to make would resonate far beyond the confines of that small cafe, shaping the very essence of what it meant to love, to lose, and to ultimately find one's way back to the light. In the midst of a world where passion and betrayal entwined like thorny vines, the latest confrontation within the sprawling saga of these intertwined families sent shockwaves through every heart. In a dimly lit room of a beloved family home, a sanctuary that had witnessed both tender moments and bitter clashes, a scene unfolded that would forever alter the course of their lives. Harrison, though still a young boy with eyes full of innocent wonder, was thrust into a situation far beyond his tender years. On that fateful afternoon, as the family gathered under one roof with tension hanging thick in the air, Harrison witnessed a heartbreaking scene. Claire, whose actions had always been as unpredictable as they were passionate, struck his own mother. For a child, the act of seeing a beloved figure in pain is often incomprehensible, but Harrison, with a precocious understanding of family bonds and loyalty, immediately recognized the violation of a sacred trust. His eyes, wide with a mix of shock and burgeoning anger, betrayed the internal struggle between his innocent love for his mother and the pain of witnessing such cruelty. Harrison had always held a special place in his heart for his mother, Summer. Despite the turbulent undercurrents of their family dynamics, Summer's unconditional love for him had been a constant source of comfort. Her gentle smiles, warm embraces, and soothing words had created a cocoon of security that Harrison clung to amidst the chaos of adult conflicts. However, the tender love between mother and son was being undermined by the actions of those who sought to control their destinies. Kyle, the man who claimed to be the patriarch and had his own complicated loyalties, often found himself at odds with Summer's maternal affection. His disapproval of the deep bond between Harrison and Summer was rooted in an old grudge and a misguided belief that love, in its purest form, should be rationed only among those he deemed worthy. Kyle, desperate to assert his influence over Harrison's life, sought to mold the boy's affections in a way that would favor his own interests. He decided that Harrison needed to spend more time with Claire, a decision intended to bridge a gap that Kyle believed would eventually lead to a more controlled, manageable future for his son. In his mind, fostering a closer relationship between Harrison and Claire would temper the natural affection the boy had for Summer and redirect his loyalty to a person who was less complicated and perhaps easier to manage. Kyle's plan, however, was steeped in the bitter complexities of his own internal conflicts, as he struggled to reconcile his past with the uncertain promise of the future. Yet, as fate would have it, the family's inner turmoil was about to reach a crescendo. Victor, a man known for his steely resolve and formidable influence, sensed that the spiraling tensions threatened to tear his family apart. With his two granddaughters caught in the crossfire of a bitter feud engineered by a man filled with hatred and resentment, Victor knew that drastic measures were required. The thought of his granddaughters, once symbols of hope and unity, pitted against each other in a relentless battle of wills, was simply unacceptable. Victor's heart, hardened by years of witnessing betrayal and sorrow, now beat with a resolute determination. This chaos must end, and the sanctity of family ties must be restored at any cost. In the eyes of Victor, the catalyst of all this turmoil was none other than a bitter resentment that had festered within the family for far too long. A hatred that had been personified by the very man who now sought to control every aspect of his grandchildren's lives. He knew that if the cycle of bitterness continued, it would not only harm those directly involved but would also taint the legacy of the family for generations to come. Victor's ultimatum was clear. The toxic influence had to be eradicated, and a peaceful resolution had to be found before irreparable damage was done. Meanwhile, Jack, another key figure whose weary heart had grown tired of the constant strife, watched the unfolding drama with deep sorrow. Once an ardent believer in the possibility of love and reconciliation, Jack now found himself disillusioned by the relentless cycle of violence and retribution that had become all too familiar. His eyes, heavy with the weight of too many broken promises and shattered dreams, reflected a longing for an end, a desperate plea for the cessation of this ceaseless battle for dominance over the heart. Jack's spirit, worn thin by the incessant turbulence, echoed a silent, fervent wish that the complexities of Kyle's turbulent love life would finally reach a resolution. In his mind, perhaps it was time for the entanglements to be unraveled, so that each member of the family could finally find peace. The scene that day was one of raw, unbridled emotion, a collision of old wounds and new betrayals that left no soul unscathed. Harrison's outcry, filled with the righteous indignation of youth, reverberated through the halls. His small frame, quivering with anger, served as a stark reminder that even the youngest among them were not immune to the effects of the bitter conflict that had gripped the family. It was as if his silent protest declared that family was not something to be manipulated or divided by the petty squabbles of adults. but a sacred bond that demanded respect and protection. As the hours wore on and the initial shock of the confrontation began to give way to a heavy, brooding silence, every individual present was forced to confront the painful truth of their fractured existence. For Claire, the act of striking Summer was not simply an impulsive reaction, but a culmination of the emotional pressures that had built up over time. A desperate cry for attention and recognition in a world that had repeatedly overlooked her pain. Her actions, though reprehensible in their execution, were symptomatic of a deeper malaise, a fractured sense of identity and purpose that had been magnified by the relentless tug-of-war between loyalty and desire. Kyle, caught between his misguided efforts to reshape Harrison's affections and his own internal conflicts, found himself teetering on the edge of an existential crisis. His desire to control the situation, to mold the lives of those he deemed subordinate to his will, was rapidly being undermined by the undeniable reality of familial love. The more he tried to enforce boundaries and redirect loyalty, the more he realized that true love could not be confined within the rigid parameters of control and expectation. It was an elusive, ever-changing force that defied manipulation, a force that, once unleashed, could not be easily tamed by the iron fist of authority. Victor's intervention, though seemingly harsh, was driven by an unyielding commitment to preserving the integrity of the family. His command to put an end to the ongoing strife was not born out of a desire to assert his dominance, but rather from a profound understanding that the survival of their familial legacy depended on unity and mutual respect. The specter of hatred, personified by a man who had sown discord for far too long, had to be exorcised before it could claim further victims. Victor's insistence on ending the conflict was a call to action, a plea for each family member to look beyond their personal grievances and embrace the larger, more enduring bonds that connected them all. In this maelstrom of conflicting loyalties, the question of allegiance loomed large. Who would ultimately emerge as the guardian of love and the arbiter of peace? Would Kyle's efforts to control and manipulate prevail, or would the inherent strength of familial love, represented by the fierce, unyielding spirit of Harrison and the compassionate resilience of Summer, triumph in the end? The answer was far from certain. Each character was caught in the vortex of their own making, their lives intertwined in a tapestry of love, betrayal, and the unrelenting search for redemption. In the wake of this latest upheaval, one thing was undeniably clear: the path to reconciliation would not be paved with violence or coercion, but with the courageous act of facing one's own inner demons. It would require a collective effort, a willingness to acknowledge past mistakes, to forgive, and to forge a new beginning based on mutual understanding and respect. For Harrison, whose small voice had become the clarion call for unity, the journey toward healing would begin with the recognition that family is not defined by conflict, but by the unbreakable bonds of love that endure even in the darkest of times. And so, as the echoes of the day's turmoil slowly faded into memory, each member of the family was left to grapple with the consequences of their choices. In the quiet moments that followed, beneath the weight of unspoken regrets and tentative hopes, a glimmer of possibility began to emerge. Perhaps, in time, the wounds of the past could be healed, not through the force of will, but through the gentle, persistent power of forgiveness and understanding. Only then could the family hope to reclaim the light that had once shone so brightly within their hearts, illuminating a future free from the shadows of hatred and pain. Ultimately, the crossroads at which they now stood was more than a mere moment of crisis, it was a turning point that would define the legacy of their love. As each individual wrestled with their own desires and the need for resolution, the choices they made in the days to come would echo far beyond the confines of their troubled home. For in the end, the strength of a family is measured not by the absence of conflict, but by the courage to rise above it and to rebuild the bonds that bind them together, no matter how arduous the journey might be.